Hello everyone, and welcome to Chapter 16, Speaking to Persuade. Previously, we've been discussing a lot of the special occasion speech lessons, and some of the emotional appeal of those lessons we are now going to be transferring into Speaking to Persuade. And the reason why emotion is such a big important part of it is because some people are very easy to persuade and some people are very hard to persuade. And when we learn how to more effectively persuade, we can affect both of these parties. And if we fall into that easy to persuade area, group, then we will be less likely to persuade or are more likely to persuade when changing our perspective is called for. So let's dive right on in to why is persuasion important. First, we should define it. Persuasion is the process of creating, reinforcing, or changing people's attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. So let's break that down a little bit. Persuasion is not simply changing someone's mind. Instead, it is about a lot more than that. It is creating a new perspective, a new attitude of something, reinforcing a attitude or belief or behavior. So if I already believe what you're saying, then my persuasive appeal can still be impactful. And changing. And that's the one that we're more familiar with, changing people's attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. Attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors, there are many goals of persuasive speeches. So, when learning about it, it can bring us social capital. Being able to influence others around us is able to increase our social capital. Also, it helps inoculate us to unethical or fallacious persuasive appeals. A lot of people these days, more than I thought possible, are very easily persuaded by fallacious persuasive appeals. So, by learning lessons like this, we are able to avoid being falling victim to these appeals. And that this is going to be building on the skills that we've already developed in informative speeches and to improve our overall public speaking ability. But with persuasion, we also have to consider the ethics of persuasion, because it is very tempting to take ethical shortcuts to achieve our objectives. That I may think that the ends justify the means. You know what? If I unethically persuade someone to believe a certain way or support the right political candidate, then the ends justify the means. But that we can have ethical speeches and persuasive speeches. Also, why it's tempting is because a lot of those ethical shortcuts makes the job easier. Not researching well, not giving the right information, or giving the only information that I found, or give information only that confirms my existing argument. All of this is unethical because you are presenting people either deliberately false and deceptive statements or information that you may already somewhat believe is not entirely true. Or even if you don't believe, even if you still believe it's true but didn't research it well enough, you could present false information and call it true, which is unethical. So we can do both, but it takes a little bit more work, takes a little bit more effort, and will be more impactful in the long run. But in a communication situation, you only have 50% of the interaction. And this is especially true with persuasion, because we are not just simply giving information and let them decide. Instead, we are actively trying to change or reinforce or create an attitude, belief, or behavior. So We want to create an impact on our audience, so understanding our audience is even more vital than other types of any other type of speech. So we have to dive into some important parts of the audience. We have to understand the audience's disposition, the audience's needs, and the audience's relevance to the topic. So we start with audience disposition. This involves social judgment theory, which is based on ego involvement and current attitudes towards the topic or anchor positions. So let's say that I am trying to persuade you to buy an Xbox Series X. If you agree with me, you are going to have some latitude of acceptance. Latitude being how much you accept or how little you accept of my argument. Keep in mind, accepting only a little bit of my argument doesn't necessarily mean that you disagree. It's just that you agree only partially because you just don't know enough about the topic. So, if you agree with me that you should buy an Xbox Series X, then you are going to have a latitude of acceptance. You just don't know how much yet. If you disagree, if you are PlayStation all the way, then you will have some area of latitude of rejection. You are going to reject some of my argument. Now, how do we get the latitude? That is through ego involvement, how strongly you feel about the topic. So, if you are with me on Xbox Series X, then you will agree with the majority of what I have to say. And if you don't really care all that much, you're going to agree with some of what I have to say, but you will not have opinions at that point. With very little opinion, we can create attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. With high latitudes of acceptance, we reinforce that attitude or belief or behavior. And now let's move to the other side. Let's say PS5 all the way man or woman strongly or very disagrees, but you know they don't really care all that much. In that point, I am creating an attitude for them. I'm creating a belief. I'm creating a behavior. And now for the one that we are most familiar with, high latitudes of rejection. High latitudes of rejection if someone feels very strongly against me. What do I do in this situation? I strive to chip away at the edges of their belief and change their minds. And this one's a lot harder because can we force people to change their minds? Absolutely not. There is no way to do that, and with cognitive bias and people can stay insulated so that no matter what information you give them, they will never change their minds. So, there are alternative ways of going about this by trying to find areas of agreement and then slowly bringing them to your side. A good example of this is, what type of video games do you like? Well, I like this game, this game, this game, this game, this game. Okay, well, I agree. I like those games as well. And, I've really enjoyed, some of your games that you like that aren't on Xbox. That being said, I also like this game, this game. This game's actually very similar to this game. This game's actually very similar to this game as well. Okay, and so slowly creating common ground is more impactful than, well, you're wrong because of this. Because that puts people on the defense, that creates some of the that puts up the walls, that creates the soldier mindset where I'm defending my position, and as a result now, I am not open to any of your conversation. So audience disposition is something important to understand, their current attitude towards the topic, as well as how strongly they feel about that topic. Next, we move on to audience needs, and this is best resembled through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the very basic level, we have to satisfy physiological needs in order to live. We also have safety needs, which are slightly less important than that. Security of body, of employment, of resources, of morality, of family, of health, of property. And then slightly less important than that are love and belonging needs. And if we do not satisfy those safety and physiological needs, we will not care that much about love and belonging. Or less important than love and belonging is esteem. Self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others, and respect by others. And at the very top of the hierarchy, the things that, if all of those more basic needs are met, then I will focus on is morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, and acceptance of facts. So let's say that I believe that my physiological needs, my safety needs are met, my love and belonging needs are met, my self-esteem needs are met. Then, will a persuasive appeal focusing on self-actualization needs, would that be impactful? Yeah, I would say so, of course. Now let's do a different one. Let's say that my physiological needs and safety needs are not met, that I do not care, that I'm very much struggling right now. Will self-actualization, persuasive appeals be impactful? Not particularly. Let's do another scenario. Let's say that my physiological and safety and love and belonging needs are met, but someone comes over and explains and persuades me that my physiological needs and safety needs are not met, and I am persuaded. Is that impactful? Of course, because I was persuaded. Now let's say that some other person comes up and persuades me, tries to persuade that the person who just called into question those safety and physiological needs are wrong. That they are wrong, that they are prejudiced, and that they are immoral. They are immoral, they are prejudiced, and they are wrong. Will I be persuaded by that appeal? Not really. Because, as we've said before, my physiological and safety needs are now called into question, so I will not be persuaded by self-actualization needs. And this is very much how dictators create their power, by calling in fear of disembodied others, by calling into question their physiological and safety needs, even though they may already be met in reality. And as a result, when people try to refute that, the damage has already been done. So how do we avoid that? By focusing on those physiological and safety needs as well, but in more productive ways when we are encountering that sort of situation. And lastly, we have audience relevance. Audience relevance involves elaboration likelihood model, which is that listeners process information in one of two ways depending on the relevance of the message. So if the information is entirely relevant, let's say that a stop sign is right in front of my house. Then I'm going to be motivated by personal involvement, and I will critically think, question, and consider all of the possible options associated with a stop sign in front of my street. Now let's move to a different type of processing, of peripheral processing. This is when it is not relevant to me. Let's say that it's a few blocks down. At that point, I'd probably disregard information. You know what, Steve lives there, Steve seems pretty smart, so sure, I'll vote for that. Why not? Again, Depending on the relevance, we are going to process information in one of two ways. And this is incredibly natural, but they do have distinct advantages. So, in American politics, a lot of people feel like their vote doesn't matter. So, is voting relevant for them? Not really. They would engage in more peripheral processing, and that's why great politicians have had to try to meet the audience where they are by having what's the word? Snapbacks, having or clapbacks. Sorry, having nice talking points, having being funny, being attractive, being all of these things to address this audience. But there are also those who make their votes based on central processing, and that is within the electorate as well, and they also have to address this group. So this is one of those situations where they have to meet the audience where they are, and we should meet the audience where they are too. If the speech topic that we choose is not entirely relevant to them, that's fine. I understand that. But so we want to engage in both, and we engage in peripheral processing by creating some of that need to know information and being, engaging in some of that emotional appeal. But we also engage in that central way. Which one is better? Which one is better? It is central processing, because if someone gets persuaded by peripheral processing, they are more likely to change their mind after the fact. Whereas with central processing, and they've carefully questioned and considered and critically thought, they are more likely to have that attitude, belief, behavior moving forward. Now we move on to another rhetorical thought, the guilt redemption cycle. So this is one way that we can engage the audience with this peripheral information, by engaging their emotion. A lot of times, the most powerful emotion for an audience to feel is guilt. Guilt that something that they are doing is causing a problem that they care deeply about. So we have guilt. Let's say that I feel guilt that I am not eating right. Now, how do I purify that guilt? Well, I can either mortify myself, hurt myself, or victimize someone else, blame someone else. So I purify by mortifying, by working out, going on a diet, eating salad for a whole week. Then we also have victimage, and victimage is an interesting one because it is blaming someone else. I shouldn't feel guilty because it is their fault. It is Steve's fault. Steve keeps on doing this. They're the worst. Or, there's never enough, there's no good food in the house, so I blame society, or I blame, the person who buys the food. So we purify in those ways, and we eventually feel redeemed and have nice heel clicks. And this can happen, and this happens in many different situations. We feel guilty about the environment, the environment now. So we either mortify ourselves by buying electric, or by driving only a few times a day, or by only trying to eat more vegetables. Or we have victimage, where we blame this politician or that politician or this politician to try to create pressure for them to change. Both of which redeem, both of which are more or less productive. But a lot of those dictators will create guilt about something and strive for the audience to victimize a minority group, which makes the audience feel better, but hurts a particular group. So we've just talked about ways to adapt to the audience. Next, we are going to be talking about the 3 types of persuasive speeches: propositions of fact, value, and policy. See you in the next one.